in ballooning, we're really in the entertainment business. We're entertaining people. They come out to enjoy this ride. If they just get on a bus or get on a plane, it's not quite the same thing. So we're really hosts when people come out for a balloon ride. And I always thought that Bill would be a very fun host to be with, because he would be enjoying it just as much as the people experiencing it for the first time.
When I first started ballooning, I was part of this balloon racing circuit. So I was constantly competing against the other pilots. And I was, we had prize money, so I was competing to win. But I was up against some of the most experienced pilots in the world. And that made me better.
Thank you all for joining me here today. I really appreciate you all taking the time out of your busy schedules to sit with us and have this discussion. As you all know, I've been working on a documentary on my father and his life. It's called Balloon Man. And so what I wanted to do really was not only introduce him to the world and his endeavors outside of ballooning, but I really wanted to put a spotlight on ballooning. Now, most of us, well, all of us on this call, ballooning has been a majority of our lives. I was flying since I was less than 1 year old. So we all know how exhilarating the sport is. We all love ballooning, but we're a niche community. And there's so many other people out there that I just kind of want to introduce it to them and like really every aspect of it. So I just want to go around the room, the virtual room, and starting with Dad, and then we'll just go around how I see you all in order right here. But I want you to say ballooning is for blank, and I want you to fill in the blank. It's kind of like a pitch to someone who doesn't know anything about ballooning. Ballooning is for blank and why. So starting with you, Dad.
Ballooning is for dreamers. I've heard so many people that I've taken up saying it was their lifelong dream to go up in a balloon. So ballooning is for dreamers.
Perfect. And next, Cheri.
Well, I forgot the for part, but I was just going to say ballooning is magical. And that's just because it's such a magical experience floating above the earth.
Perfect. All right. Next, Bert.
Ballooning is for the sheer adventure. You never know where you're going to wind up. You're a particle of the wind, and it takes you places that you don't even know that you're going to until you get there.
Perfect. All right, Glen, you're next on the screen.
I was going to say ballooning is for discovery, because you learn a lot about yourself, about other people. You learn if you're a delegator or a control freak. You learn if you're a competitor, if you're in it to win it, or if you're in it just for the enjoyment, the magic that Cheri talked about. You learn if you are able to play well with others, and you can learn about the world around you from the different rallies you go to, whether you just go to rallies in your own backyard or you travel to events around the world. So there's a lot of discovery to be had if you're involved in ballooning.
That's very true. All right, Keith, you're next.
Ballooning is for sharing. I love sharing the experience of ballooning with new people. Like what other person said about their lifelong dream. I love introducing new people, especially young people, to ballooning and expose them to something different. So I love sharing it with people.
Perfect. All right, and Mick.
Ballooning's for anyone. You don't have to be a pilot. You could be a driver, you could be crew, you could be a photographer or spectator. It's one of those activities that anyone can participate at any level that makes them comfortable.
Yeah, you're correct. I've been a crew member, a student pilot for some time. I've done, various aspects of ballooning. So yes. All right. So I just want to go around the room, and if you can just give an introduction and what inspired you to start ballooning. And also, like I mentioned, there's so many different aspects of ballooning. There's, gas ballooning, hot air ballooning, you can fly competitively. There are special shapes. They're all different types of, aspects of ballooning, commercial ballooning. So just give an introduction and then what your specialty is and what really inspired you to start ballooning in the first place. So we could just go in the same order for everything. So Dad? Oh, you're on mute.
I'm Bill Costen. I had never seen a balloon in my life. I got a knock on my door, and my cousin said, "Let's start a balloon club." I said, "What's a balloon?" And he showed me a picture of a balloon and showed me how it worked and everything. And 6 of us got together and started a balloon club. So the first balloon I ever saw was a balloon that we bought together. And once that balloon was inflated, and there, I saw the whole magic of it blowing up and then going up in the sky and then chasing it. I was sold the first day. So over the years, I became a commercial pilot and spent most of my time doing commercial work, and then finally taking people up for rides for over 40 years.
All right, perfect. And Cheri?
Hi, I'm Cheri White, and I currently run a corporate balloon program for the Rural Electric Co-ops, Touchstone Energy Cooperatives. We have 5 balloons situated around the country, and we're waiting for COVID to leave so we can start flying again. I was raised in the sport. My father was a balloon pilot, and when I was 13, we started flying in the 70s, and showing my age. And then I was a competitor for a while. I guess I still do some competition, and I fly gas balloons. I enjoy flying in international competitions and meeting pilots from around the world.
Wonderful. All right. Bert?
Yeah, hi, I'm Bert Padelt. For me, gas ballooning has always been my true love. Dating all the way back to when I was a child. My earliest memories were holding a balloon in my hand and dreaming that I was floating with this balloon and it would be taking me places. And so it was the gas balloon that got my interest. And as a matter of fact, I didn't even know that hot air balloons existed until I read an article in Boys Life magazine on hot air balloons. Yeah, so gas ballooning is my forte. I love the silent flight and the adventure of gas ballooning.
Right. There's actually something that stood out to me when we had a conversation, Bert, the other day. And I didn't tell my dad, I didn't mention it to my dad, but can you tell him now about that article that you saw?
Well, when I was growing up, probably from the time I was 10 years old, I would collect articles, magazine articles and that kind of thing. And I would go to the library every day, and every month when the new periodical literature would come out, I would look for balloon articles in magazines. And your dad's article in the Ebony magazine, I was fascinated by that article. And what fascinated me about it was when I was a kid growing up, my concern was ballooning was going to be a flash in the pan. And by the time I was old enough to learn how to fly, there would be no ballooning anymore. And what solidified that was that Ebony article I read about your father. And I thought to myself, well, you know, there's teachers that are flying now. There's all kinds of people from all kinds of walks of life, and now there's an ex-football player that is flying as well, and it pretty much convinced me that ballooning was here to stay.
What do you think about that, Dad? I've been wanting to tell you that for days, but I was like, I'm going to let Bert tell you. You're on mute. Maybe just stay off mute.
Actually, a woman sent me a Christmas card 40 years ago when she saw that article, and we've exchanged Christmas cards every year since. We've never met each other, but we've exchanged cards every year from that article.
And that doesn't surprise me coming from you.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that was a fun story. All right. Glen?
Well, I'm Glen Moyer. I'm editor of Ballooning Journal, the official magazine for the Balloon Federation of America, which is the national aerosports organization for ballooning. And I guess my life has sort of come full circle. I got into ballooning via my journalism roots. I was working in television, and I'm going to date myself like Cheri did in 1976 during the American Bicentennial. I was watching, I was in our newsroom, my newsroom where I grew up in Texas, watching, I think it was NBC News, and various cities and towns around the country were doing special events for the Bicentennial. And in Houston, they were having a hot air balloon rally. And I grew up reading flying books that my dad had had. My uncle was in the Air Force. My dad had a love of flying, and that was instilled in me. So I drove over to Houston the next morning to see this balloon rally. Using my press credentials, I met the guy in charge, a guy that most everyone on this panel will know, Bill Murtorf. Had a conversation with him, and it was too windy to fly that day, so I didn't get the ride I was looking for. But he said, if you come back sometime, we'll take you for a balloon ride. So I went back a few months later, I guess it was. It was right about this time of year, early December, and got my first balloon ride with Bill. And Cheri's dad, Sam Edwards, was one of the pilots who was flying that morning, and we've reminisced about that flight a number of times over the years. So started out by getting a free balloon ride as a journalist, and ended up now for the past 20 years writing about ballooning. So ballooning has very much been my vocation and my avocation for most of my adult life.
Wonderful, wonderful, perfect. All right, Keith.
My name is Keith Sproul. I got into ballooning with two completely different aspects. One, I'm a ham radio person, was writing GPS software that's used by people doing weather balloons to 100,000 feet. And two, which completely sounds totally opposite end of the spectrum, my wife is a rabbit lover since she was about 3 years old. And we went to balloon festivals occasionally. Then we started going to see the Energizer Bunny. Then they needed volunteers on the Bunny, and we volunteered. And then I became crew, then crew chief. So I started with special shapes, and I love special shapes. So that was how my forte. I've not done commercial rides really. I've done a few, but not very much. But I love the special shapes, and I love flying for fun and sharing with people. I do a fair amount of teaching ballooning. So I started with special shapes.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, I definitely want to get into that later, special shapes. All right, Mick.
Hi, I'm Mick Murphy. I started just lucky to get a balloon ride back in the early 80s. From there, I started crewing and then working towards my license. I do some rides, but I focus mostly on flight instruction, and served on different boards, active with the BFA for a period of time, and just really like all the people that I was able to meet in ballooning. And I really like the social side of the sport.
Wonderful. So yeah, we have a nice mix on this call. All aspects of ballooning pretty much covered on this one call. So I'm definitely looking forward to the discussion, and hopefully people can learn something about ballooning. So starting with Dad, in 2016, you actually received the Yost Master Pilot Award, which was awarded for 40 years of consecutive flying, demonstrating skill and professionalism. Talk about your commercial business that you started back in the 70s, Sky Endeavors, and what you really did with that commercial business, and what was it like being in business really for 40 years? Nowadays, certain businesses shut down after maybe the first year, 2 years, 5 years, but you've had this business for 40 years. Talk about your commercial business.
Actually, like I said, I started out in a club, and I saw the commercial aspect of ballooning immediately. First balloon I saw was the Budweiser balloon. And I used to drink Budweisers. I said, that's pretty cool. Let me try ballooning. So I always was looking at trying to get a sponsor to buy my first balloon. And I ended up developing and creating the bicentennial Connecticut bicentennial balloon in 1976. Bob Walagunda, who was the commercial distributor for Raven at that time, I met him for the first time, and he knew I played with the Buffalo Bills, so he asked me to buy my first balloon, which was a requirement to be a dealer for Raven, and that's what I did. Me and another guy bought a balloon, and I had 5 instructors my first 6 hours of flying, because back then there were hardly any instructors in Connecticut at all. So I went on to get my private license, and I would say my first 50 hours of flying was solo. I was just trying to build up, to get that commercial license and trying to get a commercial balloon. And Bob, he actually started a balloon racing circuit that went all over the country. And he asked me, did I want to be part of it? I said, yeah, definitely. So I used to go all over the country flying, racing, hare and hound races for money. And I learned really from Ed Yost and Joe Kittinger. I remember sitting around, the hotel listening to Ed and Joe and all the different older pilots talking about how they started ballooning. I said, wow, the first 50 hours I did were nothing like what they were talking about. So I think the very first balloon race that I was in downtown Philadelphia. Took off, all the other pilots took off with 40 gallons of gas. I had 20 gallons by myself over downtown Philadelphia. As soon as I got up there, I said, whoa, no landing spots at all, anywhere. I ended up landing on the Jersey Turnpike, and that was my introducing to commercial balloon racing. So over the years, I started developing different commercial balloon banners. I used to do a lot of banner flights all over the country in balloon festivals and balloon races. And in my own town, I used to drive over rush hour traffic, with their banner on the side. And I did that for years, and I started doing cold air balloons. And that was a big thing when they first started. They used to put a cold air balloon up on a mall or something for the whole weekend. They paid very well. So I was doing that at one time. One time, Chantal, there was a mall opening up, the Meriden Mall, and me, my wife, my 3-year-old son, and Chantal was about 1. We had a lift. We couldn't get a babysitter that day, so we had to lift the kids up through the roof of the mall, and then I had to push the cold air balloon up through the roof. My wife got up there and pulled up all the kids and everything. So we were carrying Chantal across the roof of the mall in her car seat. And my son, who was 3 years old, he was walking across. It was snowing on the roof, and there were 10 men on the roof with hard hats. They were looking at us. They picture
Why do you have these things?
4 black people walking on the roof of a mall in the snow with a little baby getting ready to put up a roof balloon. So Chantal has.
That was my introduction to ballooning. Wow.
So, but you know, when I started going to balloon festivals, I enjoyed taking people up for their first ride.
Mhm.
That was my true passion in ballooning. I love watching people's expression when they got up in that balloon. Half of them were afraid, and 5 minutes later, they were, oh, wow, look at that, look at that, look at that. So I just love watching people enjoying, you know, God's creation. And
Right.
so the next, 30 years, I was doing ballooning full time as a ride business. Now, 40 years of doing a ride business and dealing with new passengers every single day, that was a task.
Mhm.
Everybody, I mean, I'm sorry it's too windy to fly today. What do you mean? My family came up this weekend.
I'm getting married. This is my wedding.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Totally understand.
and I used to have a large crew. One year when I took a crew up to Glens Falls to the Adirondack Balloon Festival, I had 37 crew members. And I got most of them up that weekend, short hops here and there. So we always had a whole lot of fun going to different festivals and everything. And I always had a, pretty good sized crew every time I flew.
Right.
So I've just loved ballooning my whole life.
Yeah, same here. And even my friends, they would always want to tag along and come to the different races. It was literally my childhood. So I definitely enjoyed it. Thank you for being a pilot and introducing me to ballooning. All right, I want to move on to Cheri. So you mentioned that, your father flew, just like mine. I decided to be a filmmaker, but ballooning really stuck with you. And, you world-class competitor. You have the highest honor in ballooning for your flight you went from Geneva to Portugal, right? Yeah, so talk about the competitive side of ballooning a little bit, and I want to hear about that flight. Were there any challenges that you faced during that flight, and what does it take to prepare for a flight like that?
Well, that particular flight was in the Gordon Bennett, and I think it was 2009. And it was a really exciting flight because we took off from Geneva and the weather was not that great. And we were flying in a gas balloon where you just drop sand if you want to go high. And we flew over towards France and we got caught in the Mistral winds, which take you down into the Mediterranean. And so all of us were flying on this flight and we were talking back and forth on the radios, and the winds were not, the meteorologist had said the winds won't be that fast. Well, we were going 50 miles an hour, just, 100 feet, 150 feet off the ground. So there was no way, and it was at night, there was no way to slow down. So we all ended up going out into, or most of the pilots went out, going out into the Mediterranean. 3 of the first pilots that hit the Mediterranean ended up landing in Algeria. There was a team from Finland, one from Austria, and one from somewhere else, Belgium, I think, and they were all under house arrest. But it was an exciting flight. We were over the Mediterranean. We weren't sure if we were going to be able to get back to Europe. The flight was 3 days, and we actually curled back and went over and landed in Portugal. So I think that was probably my most exciting flight of my entire life in a gas balloon. And as Bert said, it's really magical when you get to experience that. You asked about the competition side of ballooning. That's competitive in gas balloons, and that's where it doesn't matter how long you're in the air, it's all on the distance. It's how far you can fly, whoever flies the furthest distance. And they have a race in America every year, the America's Challenge out of Albuquerque. And then they have, usually the Gordon Bennett is held in Europe, although it has been in the United States. So I don't do a lot of gas flying, but I do enjoy those two events every year. And then hot air ballooning competition. When I was young, I used to enjoy flying in the U.S. Nationals, and it took a lot of work. And I would go up to a place, and back then we didn't have GPSs, and we didn't have cell phones and moving maps, so you had to do it more. Yeah, walkie-talkies, basically, CBs.
Okay.
I can still remember when CBs came in. And I can also remember flying down low and yelling to someone, what street do you live on, so that you could find yourself on the map. It was a lot more challenging back then, but I think competition makes any pilot a better pilot, because you learn how to navigate to a certain spot, and you really test your skills. But it's a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it. It's been my lifelong thing.
Right. And, in my experience, when I go out, ballooning is really a male-dominated sport. There are, there are female pilots, but I see more females on the crew and spectators. So what has your experience been like as a woman in ballooning? And, how can we get more women to be attracted to becoming a pilot,
Well, I think that, it's actually interesting. Certain parts of the country, in the United States at least, some places have more female pilots than males, and then other places have more male pilots. A lot of times, at least when I was growing up, my mother drove the chase truck, because my dad was the pilot in the family, and someone had to crew for him and make sure that he got down. And then both of his daughters became pilots, so then she became crew for all three of us, so she never really pursued it. And I know a lot of females that are that important role of crew chief. But I think there's more women now involved in the sport, and we started having a women's national championship to try to get more females involved and kind of support each other in the sport. And I think, like all things, we're seeing more women, and hopefully that continues.
Perfect. And can you briefly touch on your corporate balloon program as well?
Yeah, in my corporate balloon program, I was competing in the U.S. Nationals back in 1999, and I was flying, and that was our first U.S. Women's Championship held in conjunction with the U.S. in Illinois. And I'd always seen, the corporate pilots with their uniforms and their nice vans, and thought, that would be really fun to do something like that. But, if you talk to anybody, most corporate programs last 3 years, and it's really hard to get a marketing firm to decide to do a balloon program. And I just kind of lucked into this one. The Touchstone Energy was forming right about that time, because rural electric co-ops were worried about deregulation, and they were worried about the investor-owned utilities buying them all up. So they joined together and did this big marketing program, and they sponsored me at that nationals, and I flew a banner on my balloon, and they saw all the good media that you could get from it, and called and said, what would it take to have a balloon with our logo on it? And so we put the program together 21 years ago, and we've kept it running. We're up to 5 balloons now, so it's
20 years. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Perfect. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Moving on to Bert. So you are most known for, custom building gas balloons, record-setting gas balloons. And, just like Cheri, you have the highest honor in ballooning. And congratulations on your recent, you're an inductee into the U.S. Hall of Fame, Ballooning Hall of Fame. So congratulations on that. So talk a little bit about, you started building paper balloons at the age of 14, and now, you know, your recent project this summer. Talk about that a little bit. Just the custom builds that you do, and why you're so attracted to that.
Well, I think, you know, building gas balloons, it's a labor of love for me, and it's just something that I really enjoy doing. And it's for me to build a balloon that goes out and flies a long distance. It sort of goes back to my early years in childhood, when I would dream of drifting with the wind and so forth, and where that would take you. And so a lot of these long distance flights, you know, I've built balloons that have flown across the Atlantic and across the Pacific, and a lot of these flights are sometimes flights that I wanted to do growing up. Flying across the Atlantic, for instance, was something I dreamed of doing before it was ever done, knowing that by the time I was old enough to do it, it probably would have been done by then, and it was.
Right.
But for me, building these balloons and seeing the records that they have gotten, it allow. I mean, if I can't go out and do it, I can build a balloon that can, and so I sort of live through that, and it's very rewarding for me. I build balloons better than I fly them, I think.
Well, you're good at both. I'm just gonna say that. Talk about this summer, the excursion with David Blaine.
Well, that was a project that David had dreamed of doing for quite some time, and so he reached out to a number of people that he felt that could help him achieve this goal. And I was brought into the project through Don Day, who was a meteorologist and a good friend of mine. And Don had called me and mentioned that David was interested in doing this, and thought that it would be something that I would be interested in doing. And so that's how it all started. And it actually, for me, it was a lot of fun. It turned out that I enjoyed it quite a bit, because it was the first project that I was involved in that I didn't feel the responsibility solely on my shoulders. David put together a very good team of people, and it was that team effort that really helped David achieve his goal. And for me, it was the first project where I could sit back and relax and actually enjoy it.
Right. And can you just talk about one of your longest flights? What that experience was like? What went into preparing for something like that? And like what you saw, what just excites you about these different excursions that you go on?
Like I said, I build them better than I fly them.
Okay.
My longest flight actually was just a little over. I've had a couple of flights over 1,000 miles, and those are very good flights. And one of the flights was a flight from Albuquerque to West Virginia during the America's Challenge, and we took second place in that flight. Louis Vitanza, my co-pilot, on that flight with me. And as a matter of fact, Cheri, I think that may have been the first flight that you and Mark flew together in the America's Challenge. I remember that flight because we had a very fast flight. We went more north east, and a lot of the balloons either went northeast or went southeast. And we landed and took second place, and then I watched Cheri and Mark for the next, I think, 24 hours. They were still in the air, going much slower, but at one point I thought they were going to overtake our distance, and as it turned out, they didn't. But yeah, so I enjoy long flights, but I enjoy safe flights, and for me, I'm a little bit on the conservative side, and but I choose to be that way because I love gas ballooning, and I've seen over the years people scare themselves to the point where they stop flying, and I don't ever want to do that because it's too important for me, and I love flying, and I love gas ballooning, and for me, it's important that I have very comfortable and safe flights. So you will never see me doing a Gordon Bennett winner because I would most likely land before I got into any type of situation weather-wise that was bad.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask because I've been on flights and the winds have picked up, and we didn't anticipate that happening. And I'm like, if you're flying for that great of a distance, have you ever encountered like a scary flight or something, where the winds picked up and maybe crash landing or something like that?
Yeah, well, with gas ballooning, you certainly have a much better chance of landing in a high wind. Because simply you're flying from one weather pattern to another. In hot air ballooning, you're flying in a very calm weather pattern, usually with a high pressure over you and that kind of thing. And you're taking off in calm winds and you're landing in fairly calm winds. Unlike gas ballooning, where you're in one weather system flying to another weather system. And so you can have high wind landings. And so as long as you've got open areas, a high wind landing, if it's executed properly, is safe. It's flying in bad weather, thunderstorms, that kind of thing, that can become tricky. And so when you're flying long distance, you're usually flying with a meteorologist that's advising altitudes to go to stay out of bad weather.
Got it. All right. Well, thank you for that. And now, Glen, so you've been able to couple two of the things that you love the most, and that is broadcasting and journalism and ballooning, and really that's how you got your start in ballooning. So talk about that a little bit, and tell me about some of the people that you've been able to cover, and what story you've been most proud of during your career.
Well, to answer the last part first, the story I think I'm most proud of is Steve Fawcett's successful flight around the world. During the course of Steve's several attempts to do that, we became friends. I was talking with him fairly regularly in the lead up to each of his flights, and then in the aftermath, including the successful flight. When I sent him a copy of the magazine after I published his flight, I still have it and still treasure it. He sent it back with a note that says "best coverage of my flight," and I'm quite proud of that. Yeah, I've been fortunate. I've really been able to. I said earlier how I got into the sport as a television journalist and got my first ride for free using my media credentials. I got a few more rides after that through the years until I got actively involved in the sport. I'm a little bit like Bert, though. He says he builds them better than he flies them. I talk about them better than I fly them. I've had a part of my broadcasting background was working as a disc jockey, and I guess maybe I'm fortunate. I've been maybe full of hot air most of my life, and so early on, long before I became a pilot, I got involved in the sport as an announcer at ballooning events. It happened originally in Fort Worth. A group of pilots balloonists were putting an event together there. I'd been out to Albuquerque that year in 1984 and heard the guy there that announces the Albuquerque rally, a gentleman named Tom Rutherford. And so we were at a committee meeting at this meeting in Fort Worth and talking about this new event they were planning. And one of my friends said, well, how would you like to be our announcer? And I thought, well, what the hell does a balloon announcer do? And then I thought, well, I heard this guy in Albuquerque and I can probably do what he does. And I was a disc jockey. And so I thought, well, so I don't have to just talk and talk and talk and talk. I can play some music when I'm not talking. And I started using instrumental, what I'd like to call, ambiance music or attitude music, whatever you want. And that started me on a career that I'm continuing to this day of announcing balloon rallies. Now I do it in the US and in the UK for the past 5 years. This year was my 31st year as the voice of the Albuquerque International Balloon Fiesta. I was then later privileged to work with Tom Rutherford. We actually met, became good friends, and became a team out in Albuquerque. And I worked with Tom for 25 years up until his retirement. And now have a new partner that I've worked with for the past 6 years, a great a guy named Art Lloyd Jr., who is my co-announcer there. So I've been doing that for, gosh, however many years now. And that has opened up great opportunities for me. But my other role is writing about ballooning. And in 1986, a gentleman named Tom Hamilton, who was a pilot out of Georgia, announced he was starting up a magazine called Balloon Life. And I'd always had this dream of being a freelance writer. And I had just gotten out of radio and television, or was in the process of getting out of it. And when he launched this magazine, and I got a letter saying, would you like to subscribe to the magazine? And I sent back, not only yes, but hell yes. And I'm a budding freelance writer, and I'd love to write for you. And I think the third issue in, he gave me an assignment to write, and I wrote for it, wrote that story for it. And I wrote a couple of more, and he gave me more and more writing responsibilities. And eventually, in 1989, hired me as the editor. And I was editor of that publication for 5 years. And then now I've been editor of ballooning for 20 years. And those two positions have really given me just such incredible opportunities to meet and cover folks. Your dad mentioned Ed Yost and Joe Kittinger, and I count both of them among my close friends. At one time, Ed Yost, at Joe's insistence, actually came to me and talked with me about writing his biography. And we were making plans for me to go up to his home in New Mexico, and then we're going to go up to some of the sites in South Dakota where he had flown. And I got a letter from him that said, well, dadgummit, I've gotten involved in another military project, so it'll just have to wait. And sadly, it waited and waited, and eventually he passed, and no one ever wrote his biography of me or anyone else. But associations like with Ed and Joe, Steve Fawcett, probably the most really remarkable and memorable experience, though, that I've ever had in ballooning because of my journalism opportunities was as editor of Balloon Life. Back in 1991, I was invited to the event that Malcolm Forbes used to hold every year at his chateau in France. And the whole weekend was just magical. But the one quick story I'll tell about that was one evening they they fence off the backyard, as we would call it, the back garden, as they call it over there, and sell tickets and invite the public in. And they have this balloons tether, and then they have this huge fireworks display. And they light up the house in red, white, and blue lights, the tricolor of France. And if you remember the song "We Are the World," that I think it was produced for a charity effort to feed people in Africa at that time, they started playing this over the sound system, and all the balloonists are in the back garden, and the fireworks are over our head, and literally ashes are falling on you. You're right underneath the fireworks. And we all linked arms, and we're kind of swaying back and forth and singing "We Are the World." And on one arm, I had a Swedish pilot named Oscar Lindström. And on the other arm, I had the first Cameron balloon pilot from the USSR. Now, I'm a kid from a small town in Texas, and I'm at this fantastic chateau in Normandy, France, with an international group of people around me, and including people like the King and Queen of Romania and all these guests of the Forbes family.
What an event.
And I'm thinking, what in the hell did I do to get here? And it was all because of ballooning. It wasn't because of anything that special that I had done, but it was because of my role as editor of Balloon Life that I was invited as media, and just had the most miraculous experience of my life. That's my most memorable moment in ballooning. But yeah, being the editor of Balloon Life and now ballooning for 20 years has given me just incredible opportunities that I'll always be thankful for.
Wow. Yeah, you've been all over the world, 29 states and U.S. states and territories, right?
Yep, and 5 countries. And as I say now, I'm announcing, I announced an annual event over in England, and was scheduled to do a second event this past year that was canceled because of COVID. So if it goes forward, hopefully in the summer of 2021, I'll be announcing 2 events over in England this year. And I was lucky to be Balloon Meister at an event down in Australia, or down in New Zealand, I'm sorry. So yeah, ballooning has given me an opportunity to go places I probably would never, ever have gone were it not for being in ballooning.
Wonderful. Well, yeah, you definitely had some wonderful experiences, all of you. I'm inspired. And, you know, I wish I could have more. Dad, come out of retirement, start flying again. All right, let's move on to Keith. So in our conversation the other day, you said that some of your favorite flights are when you're looking up at the ground. And when you said that, I had to think a minute. I was like, okay, looking up at the ground. All right, so let's talk about that. Tell me about some of those flights.
Flying when you look up at the ground, flying in canyons, gaps, gorges, whatever. Early on, when I first got into ballooning, I was reading the book, The Joy of Ballooning, which has 2 different articles that made very significant impact on me. One was an article about one-man balloons, and I do a lot of that, of chair balloons. But then there was an article about Letchworth, and the gentleman that was my pilot flew up in Letchworth some, and then we got going up there, and that's where you fly down into a 600 feet deep gorge, and it's absolutely beautiful. And then I got to go to Gallup, New Mexico, and fly in the Red Rock Canyons there. I've flown through the Delaware Water Gap from Pennsylvania into New Jersey a few times. That is its own interesting set of stuff. I'm the second person to have flown a balloon below the rim of Meteor Crater in Arizona, and the first person to ever land a balloon at the bottom. That was one of my awesome flights.
Beautiful.
We took the first day, we didn't make it to the bottom, it was just me. The second day, we took 3 balloons in, and I was the lead on all of it. We landed at the bottom, then went back out, and it was just, man, we're so used to thinking the balloons are so huge, and I came across that rim, and I felt like a pinhead.
Right, I'm sure.
That was an awesome flight. So yeah, that's my favorite, and I say it that way. But my favorite flying is when you look up at the ground and they say, "Well, planes can turn upside down." No, we can't turn upside down on balloons.
Right.
And I make people think about it a minute, like I did you. But to flying when you're looking up, it's just an interesting way to look at it, and it's like Letchworth. You go down below the rim, and now you have very little wind at all. So you're just stationary. One time I stayed in the exact same spot for 10 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Not going any place. As long as I kept my altitude at the right place, I just didn't go anywhere. And it's fun, or go down and do a splash and dash in the river, and just fun stuff like that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Absolutely. What happens if the wind just doesn't start back up and you're just stationary?
Well, you pop back up above the valley, and then you've got some winds up above. It's just that when you're below ground, the winds are above you and going across the top of the valley. They just don't get down in there, so you're in calm winds.
Got it.
So yeah, you just pop up and then you get out on that.
Right.
My other passion is special shapes. I started with Energizer Bunny as a crew, then I became crew chief. I now have 6 special shapes. I do those at festivals. I love doing the special shapes and seeing the wonder on the kids' faces of, oh wow, this is cool, and it's just a different aspect of it.
Right.
So
Yeah, I love
I
going to
love
races and seeing like different special shaped balloons. But on the piloting side, is there a difference between piloting a special shaped balloon and a traditional round balloon?
Most special shapes have an idiosyncrasy of some sort. For example, the Energizer Bunny, the drum is a rudder, so it always goes around going forward. Tony the Tiger's big nose was the same thing. The wind, whatever little wind, it would get it going the same direction. Many of them, the big deal is how big they are for landing. I mean, I can land even my 105 in a cul-de-sac. My birthday cake, I've landed in cul-de-sacs, but Energizer Bunny and my Dragon, the Dragon is twice as tall as and same with the Energizer Bunny, is twice as tall as a normal balloon. You don't land those in cul-de-sacs because they're so tall. So the biggest concern is space to land them. And I know, like on the Dragon one, so well, you got to watch out. The feet are out there, and I got I stubbed a toe on a tree and tore a foot because you're not paying attention, because it's you're normal thinking about a balloon's coming down and it's close to you. Well, the special shapes there spread out a lot further.
Right.
So yeah, there are concerns there. Once you're in the air, there's not. It's a balloon is a balloon. But the landing is the big issue, and then it's how heavy they are packing them up. Bill said about having 30 people. When they asked me how many volunteers do I want at a festival, I say all of them. My special shapes, I want a minimum of 20 people. I started with the Energizer Bunny at 1,200 pounds of the bunny, and wanting 20 people. And then my birthday cake's 800 pounds, and the Dragon is 700, and the Pandy is 600. So when you start on a 1,200 pound bunny, everything else is downhill.
Wow.
So.
And what's the difference with the chair? Like having the chair on the bottom instead of a basket? Is that more difficult to fly?
No, it's
land.
It's different to land. You've got your feet that can sort of act as shock absorbers, but it's interesting. You see your feet and grass below your feet. There's nothing else there, so it's an absolutely awesome way to look at it. I got one person when he first saw the Cheri, said, "Not only no, hell no," and he was somewhat afraid of heights. And then I told him, "Well, hey, how about going up on tether sometime?" He said, "Well, he'd do that." So I got him up on a tether. Then I took him for a flight, and the chair cured him of his fear of heights. So he's loving it. And he said that was now his favorite thing. But I've gotten more people into ballooning to the point of getting their license to get a balloon by putting them up in the chair than anything else I've ever done.
Wow.
Another comment back to Cheri. I'm right now just recently started training 3 different 16-year-old girls on balloon training. So yeah, I'm doing a lot of training, and I've got three females at the moment. So that's not too bad.
Wow.
But I enjoy training. I enjoy the special shapes, and I love the chair balloons. That's my passion. Is this? I've got 2 of the single person chair, and then I've got a double person chair. I love the chairs.
See, now I don't know if I do the chair balloon. I went skydiving before, and I think I was more afraid to land on my feet than I was to actually fall out of the sky. I don't know. Maybe I'll overcome my fears. Go flying with me one day.
The chair in a wicker basket. The wicker has some give to it, so you have a little bit more of a shock absorber there. The chair is a stainless steel chair, so when you land, the only shock absorber you have is the 2-inch thick foam pad underneath you, so it can be a little bit bumpier that way. But other than that, it's not any different. And it's just fun to fly. It's like I tell people it's my sports car, because it's a smaller balloon. I can get into smaller spaces and land it in backyards or whatever.
Right. And so growing up in ballooning, I feel like when I was younger, I was fearless. You know, I'm like, I was up in the balloon. I think I've been on my dad's highest flight, you know, his miracle flight where the fog was just so thick, we couldn't see where to land. We couldn't see power lines. We couldn't see anything. And I think I've been on his scariest flight too. So it wasn't until after college that I mustered up the courage to actually Google like ballooning accidents. And I'd never seen this. I'd never seen it. It wasn't until YouTube. And I remember calling my dad crying, like begging him to retire from ballooning. I'm like, this is it. I'm done. I want you to just be done. A few years ago, you had an experience that you got seriously injured and the other person, it was fatal for the other person. What keeps you going with ballooning? You know, because I personally, I probably wouldn't fly again. I would be too fearful. But you were back up in a balloon. I want to say, was it a month or a few months?
No, I was back up in my chair balloon on a tether less than 30 days out of the hospital. I was still on crutches.
Right, right.
That was more to prove to some family members I wasn't going to freak out. But since I don't remember the accident, there's nothing there. My wife saw me fall, but I don't remember it. But I was just, my wife and I both we got into ballooning, and we do it together. And it's so nice to have something to do together. Now, she doesn't go out as much. She got her license too, but she doesn't fly very much. But we enjoy it together. We go to the festivals together. It's something to do together and have friends together. Her best friend we got through ballooning. As somebody else was saying, it's the friendship and the social stuff. Just love interacting with other people. I love sharing with it. And it's, yes, I had a bad, well, like I said, I don't remember the accident at all. Even though I've seen the videos, I still don't remember any of it. Yeah, I was back up on the horse and get going. That was 2 years before I started flying a lot, but I was in physical therapy for 16 months, learning how to walk again.
Right.
So hospital for 7 months and physical therapy for 16 months. So it was a while before I was back to even reasonable. And I still walk with a cane and a limp because of it. But
right.
Hey,
Well,
it is what it is.
Miracle for sure. And I commend you for, getting back out there and flying. So I'm glad you're all right.
Yeah, I love it. My wife loves it too. And it was a little bit harder for her because she saw me fall.
Right.
But she was back. Yeah, the accident was in Albuquerque in October, and she helped do a glow on Christmas Eve. And then she went with the birthday cake to Australia and New Zealand in March while I sat and watched it from a hospital, and was back in doing stuff then. So she got back at it even before I did.
Wow.
But we do it together. We enjoy it together.
Yeah. It's nice. It's a family sport. I just really enjoy getting the family together, the friends together, and you see other ballooning families there that you basically grew up with, So I love ballooning. And all right, let's move on to Mick. You have a lot of experience as a commercial pilot, but you also like to train people. Now, it takes a certain type of person to be able to train someone to do this. Talk about that a little bit and why you like the training side of ballooning.
It's really challenging. It's extremely rewarding. When I first got involved with learning how to fly, it was really the first group of people that it was okay to admit you made a mistake or had an error while you were doing something. And
right.
Jim Chubbuck, I think you remember him. He would say, well, let's go out. We're going to do that thing again. And I'm going to show you what you can do and not put yourself in that position again.
Mm.
So it was a group of people that would still rib you very hard, don't get me wrong, but they would teach you and it was okay. So the fun of the excitement of training someone is you have to know where the aircraft is, you have to know where you are, and you have to really be intuitive with your student because you really want them to be able to get into certain situations before you have to step in so they can experience it. So it forces you to be a better pilot. It forces you to fly in some conditions that are a little bit tougher. So you really give someone the opportunity to experience things safely. And it's just really fun. Every flight is different. Every student's different. Every instructor's different. So that it requires you to prepare a lot more for a flight, so you're really ready to demonstrate the application. So I really do enjoy that aspect.
Is it any different from teaching someone how to drive a car? Like, no, go this way. It's different in a hot air balloon. You have to make correct decisions and pretty much instantly.
I think it's the same. You have to have a lot of patience. You have to have really good situational awareness.
Right.
You can't allow yourself to get distracted. I mean, you may want to distract a student, but you're really, it's very similar. Very similar.
Got it. And you have such a wealth of knowledge just in ballooning, and you've been able to meet so many different people, so much so that you created a one-of-a-kind ballooning museum. Talk about that a little bit and what some of the pieces that you have in your museum.
Well, modern ballooning, it's pretty amazing. I'm a history buff, and it's very rare that you can get into something and get to know and meet the people that actually did this. And so it's fascinating on many fronts to, get to know Ed Yost and talk with him on, quiet one-on-one settings, to exchange Christmas cards. And he would send letters when his wife would go back to Ireland, and he'd send something back from Ireland, in neat handwritten notes. So, also being a collector like your father or a history buff, you collect a lot of these things over the course of time. And a lot of people give it to you over the course of time. I have a lot of interesting things. I have a really, it's a 1930s gas balloon basket that originally belonged to Bob Sparks, but it was one of the early Balloon Club of America baskets. That's currently in one of my hangars here. Hope to get that to a nice museum and display soon. He was generous to give his barograph from one of his Atlantic attempts and some smoke canisters from them. A lot of different personal letters too, which are kind of really intriguing. And it's really fun to be able to say that you got to meet a lot of these people. And Julian Knott had a great relationship with him over the years. And these people I would have never been able to meet if it wasn't for flying out of Kathy's field there. And many different social events. And same thing with Joe Kittinger. When he was in the house, you could hear him a mile away. Had a great laugh, and he colorful language, and he's just a lot of fun. Nice. So yeah, the people are really fascinating. They all come from all different walks of life, and but you wouldn't know it. They're all just genuine people when they know that you really love the aviation, and they really take you under their wing, which is awesome.
Wonderful. And so when you train, what's the youngest person that you've ever trained? Is there a certain age that you have to be to fly? And then
giving lessons on and off to people that are 14 to 16, but typically it's early 20s and 30s where people really get motivated. Over the last several years, I've had a good network of fixed wing people looking to add a rating. So it's different. A few of them have a challenge with point A to point B, and the balloon doesn't do that. And fuel quantity and fuel reserves is a challenge because they're used to having an auxiliary tanker being able to land where they want to. So sometimes that's created a lot of challenges for both sides of the fence, because you have to teach them it's okay to land with less than the quantity expected sometimes.
Right.
And that's part of the fun and the change comparatively of the type of flight. So that part's kind of fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. I just want to just end, if you guys can briefly say to the layperson what you love most about ballooning. And, not everybody's interested, but maybe we can get some people who don't know much about the sport, don't know much about the business, excited about it. So if we could just go around and say something about ballooning that you love and why people should give it a shot.
The main thing I love about ballooning, as I said, was seeing the excitement of a person's first flight
Mhm.
And it always varies every single time. And watching their families, enjoying the flights and everything. I love going to the different festivals because I'm able to take the whole crew up there and give them rides with other balloonists. You know, having 100 balloons in the sky is just exhilarating for people. It's, you know, the different things I've done over the years is just meeting so many different people. Just as Mick was saying, just all kind of people you meet. The different flights that you have. Most people, when you're running a ride business, you get a lot of people who give rides as a Christmas gift or birthday gift or a wedding gift. You know, I've had people get married in balloons before. I've had, actually I had a couple, we used to take off right across from the Farmington dump. And they're married, their whole wedding ceremony was right on the ground, right across from the Farmington dump.
Oh my goodness.
So we've had so many different experiences. I mean,
Yeah.
one time we were flying out of Baltimore, and the trick was to fly across the Chesapeake Bay. And Joe Kittinger was the hair balloon on that. And that was one of my first flights as a racing balloon. And I only had 30 gallons. Everybody else had about 50 gallons on that flight. And I remember we were up around 8,000 feet trying to catch a wind to take us right across the bay. And all of a sudden, Kittinger dropped all the way down to the surface, trying to hit a little island down on the surface. And I said, no way, I'm gonna go all the way back down there and use all my fuel to get back up, because we couldn't find a wind to take us across until we got over 10,000 feet. So I just went up over 10,000 feet and got over on the other side, actually before everybody else did, because everybody else had enough fuel to go down. So it was all kind of experiences that I've witnessed over the years. So I would encourage anybody to fly in a balloon. You lose your fear. I guarantee you'll lose your fear as soon as you see something on the ground and makes you say, "Oh wow, look at that!"
Right. Oh, awesome. Everything looks like little toys. The cars, the houses, the people, the dogs. All right, Cheri.
For me, I do love the people, but I think nature is what keeps me flying. And flying gas balloons, when you're flying through the night and you're looking at the stars around you and it's quiet and you hear coyotes or cows below you, and then that first ray of sunshine when the sun's coming up in the morning. I mean, you can't even describe it. It's so beautiful. We live on such a beautiful planet.
Yeah.
So I love to enjoy it from a balloon.
Yeah, absolutely. Bert?
Well, I'd have to agree with Cheri. It's the peaceful, quiet sensation that you have in a gas balloon, flying at night. The falling stars that you see. In the beginning, you're very excited because then you're pointing them all out. And by the end of the night, you've seen so many of these falling stars that you just look at them and don't say anything. It's so quiet that in the basket, if you talk normally, it's almost like you're talking too loud. And you'll find that each of you are basically talking in whispers when you're flying, because it's so quiet. And then the sunrise is just incredible to watch the light come up over the horizon, and then waiting for that first ray of the sun as it pops up over the horizon. You never get tired of that. So gas ballooning and the things that you see in gas ballooning, like Cheri said, is something very special.
Sounds beautiful. I'm gonna have to go on a gas balloon ride. All right, Glenn.
Well, I guess for me, it's, I would echo what Cheri and Bert have said. I mean, I've flown and had some amazing experiences flying up over Lake Powell. I remember vividly my first time flying my balloon across the Mississippi River. So certainly there's that element, but more for me, I think it's the people and the places that the sport has taken me, from small towns in Texas with little balloon rallies to events in Chicago and South Carolina and California and all across the United States and New Zealand, around the world. But it's ultimately, I think it comes to the people. I mean, everybody in this panel, I consider friends, and yet, were it not for ballooning, I would never have met your dad, and certainly I would never have probably crossed paths with you, Chantal. So ballooning opens the door for you to meet some of the most amazing people, and I'm privileged to have friends all around the world that I would never otherwise have known and never have shared a part of their life. And ballooning has done all of that for me. So if you're if you're looking to experience new people in new places, ballooning is a great sport to get into, because there's an adventure connected really with every flight. Every flight is different, and it's just it really is captivating on whatever level you want it to be, whether it's nature or people or experiences or places. Ballooning has all of that, so it's an amazing sport to be a part of.
Wonderful. All right, Keith.
Well, I reiterate what other people are saying, that the people is a major aspect of it. I too have met people I would have never, ever thought possible. Joe Kittinger is an example, good friend, fantastic. And I've gotten to go places I would have never gotten to go. Another thing that I didn't mention earlier is Dawn Patrol. The gas balloon people get to see that, the sun coming up, but in hot air, if you don't fly gas, you don't see it very much, but I do Dawn Patrol, which is a exposing people to that. But I, like Bill said, I love seeing the expression on people's faces on their first flight. But I love sharing it with people, whether it's their first flight or their 10th flight. I had one lady that flew with me. We celebrated her 100th flight with me, actually flying with me 100 times over about 6 years, because she came out all the time.
Oh, wow. That's a lot of flights. Short period of
I
time.
love sharing. I love sharing it with people, and I since I don't do paid rides, I share with my crew and friends, and gee, a friend of a friend or whatever. And it's just fun to share it with people and to meet people. So yeah. And then the one thing that also, when I was first going to ballooning, I thought it'd be neat to see a bald eagle. It took 16 years before I saw my first bald eagle, but they're coming back to New Jersey, and I see them, I won't say regularly, but multiple times a year now. And seeing a bald eagle from the air was awesome.
Yeah, definitely a sight to see. All right, Mick.
Very similar. I mean, getting involved in ballooning opens the doors to different adventures, the people you meet, the locations that you're invited to, and the friends from around the world. It's an experience that, more people are welcome to come share. Once you get a taste of it, whether you like to fly or crew, people are all welcome, and the experiences are just remarkable. It's a wonderful group of people to be involved with.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all so much. I've learned so much just listening to all of you, and just visualizing some of the experiences I'll probably never have, but I enjoyed listening to the stories. So thank you all so much, and I really just appreciate you being part of this panel discussion.